show. Thanks for showing up, everybody. Thanks for being here. This is going to be a really great webinar. I'm really excited. We have panelists. I can actually say from all over the world. Riley Dunn with us is from Australia. Elaine is from Canada, and Dr. Bean here is from Texas. So I appreciate all of you guys being here. We'll get to introductions in just a moment. But again, I wanted to thank everybody for being here. So this webinar is going to be focusing on health and wellness in esports, and what the benefits are, what the drawbacks are, what the dangers are, what we can do about it. And we've got some amazing experts on here for us. Some housekeeping for this afternoon, this evening, or whenever you're watching this. If you could please throw any questions that you have for our panelists or for ourselves into chat, that would be the best place for us to see them other than the Q&A. Sometimes they get lost in Q&A and we're talking on a discussion. Christy and I are working off questions and our panelists are looking at things, and Q&A we don't always see. So please throw anything you have in chat at any time. Go ahead and throw questions in there. We really appreciate that. After the webinar, we will be sending out a post-webinar email, kind of a thanks with your certification for showing up for today, as well as any information or resources that the panelists would also like to share that can also be included in that as well. So to get started, again, thank you so much for being here. This is going to be health and wellness in esports. My name is Alex Herby, and I work for Generation Esports as the Education Integrations Manager. And with me today is Dr. Christy Custer. Christy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing so well. Thanks for having me today. Excited to be here.
Wonderful. So we're going to be kind of the moderators and let the panel go through it, because my health and wellness in esports is pretty much, running stairs up and down to deal with kids that are fighting upstairs and then running back downstairs so I can keep playing my game. So that's my health and wellness in esports, and I'm sure that's not necessarily the best one. So hopefully I can get some tips out of this crew. With us, again, like I said, are some amazing speakers. I'm so glad to have each and every one of you. We'll just kind of go around and you give a short introduction of yourselves, and then we'll get started. So let's start with Riley.
Hi, thanks, Alex. And I just want to apologize in advance. My dog's just been going off in the background. So if you hear a little chihuahua yapping, that's what it is. So yes, my name's Riley. I'm from Australia. I'm based in Brisbane, and I've got a few different things going on. My background is in exercise physiology, so I use exercise to try and help treat and manage people with health conditions, but also people who have athletic goals. I got really interested in esports a couple of years ago. I've always been a gamer, and decided to pursue a PhD in the space as well. So I'm looking at the moment how the menstrual cycle impacts health and performance of female players. I've got my own business at the moment, so I'm very embedded within using exercise and physical activity to help esports players and gamers. And that's from little habits across the day, as Alex just mentioned, trying to get some physical activity in between different games, but also helping with things like rehabilitation from pain and other health conditions associated with, sitting for long periods of time.
Absolutely. Thank you. Elaine.
Hello, I am coming from Canada, and it's much colder here than it probably is in Australia. And my background's in social work and holistic health. And a number of years ago, well, 10 actually, my own son became addicted to video gaming and was very fragile. And it was a long journey to pull him out of that addiction. And as a result, I've written 2 books, and I've been speaking and now coaching families who have gaming addicted children.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. Awesome. Dr. Bean.
Hi, yes, I am Dr. Bean, and my camera's gonna play some games with me today. Welcome to the world of home offices.
Yes.
So I'm Dr. Bean. I'm down here in Texas, and I work primarily with video gamers, nerds, and geeks and gamers on understanding, very similar to kind of like what Elaine sounds like she went through and does up in Canada, working with families, gamers, nerds, and how they can understand themselves through video games, but also making sure that they're staying healthy and not going necessarily too far to one side or another.
Wonderful. Awesome. So kind of the format for this webinar, this panel that we're going to talk about, we're going to go in a couple of different segments and themes. And so we'll, kind of go through each of those. Christy and I will be in charge of different segments. and we'll kind of go through each one and see how many we can get through. So, the first one we're going to talk about is kind of your personal experience and your insight for health and wellness in esports. And I want to pose this to Elaine. Your journey with your son Jake's gaming addiction is super powerful, and I read some of that through your LinkedIn profile and some other research that I looked up on you. Can you share some specific strategies that helped him regain his health, and how educators or parents can apply those strategies with troubles that they're seeing?
Sure. In my case, Jake's gaming addiction became most severe while he was in second year university. And he was no longer going to classes. He had gone to classes in a couple months. He's 6'2", and he dropped to 127 pounds. He wasn't bathing. It was horrible, horrible sight. He didn't think he had a problem. He thought he had a time management issue. The university caught up with him, though, and said, you can't stay in the university. And so that's when I got involved. He called home to say, they're locking the doors in 3 days. For me, it was about finding the core issue. He didn't want to be addicted to gaming. What was that core issue? I got the university involved eventually when he had the second relapse and said, listen, I can't do this on my own. I need some help here. They did provide him with a therapist at the university, not an addiction therapist, but he did work on some of his self-esteem issues. He'd gotten himself just into a situation where he didn't feel like he could do the program. He'd gone from a gifted program in secondary school where he was, big fish in a small pond, and then suddenly he was a tadpole in an ocean, and really panicked about the program. And so he used the gaming as a way to sort of avoid, first of all, the issues and to cope. And so exercise was big for me from the home front. The university was, providing help at their end. I had him, eating better, gaining some of that weight back, getting into an exercise routine. Learning to stop lying. That was a big issue for him. And, eventually pulling out of the denial and recognizing that he did have a problem and he needed to do something about that. We tried harm reduction. It just didn't work for Jake. And so he eventually, 7 years ago, gave up gaming entirely. That's been helpful, but he's continued to keep an exercise program. The biggest piece for him, I think that made the most difference, was finding new community. So he didn't have online friends anymore. How did we create new community? And so he got involved in a lot of things at the university level, some clubs, some sports, and other activities. And that was really helpful to me, just creating that new community.
Yeah. And I think, easily understandable if you can identify that root cause of the issue and then reconnect him with something that can provide that healthy benefit or that healthy community for him. And I'm so glad that he was able to come out of that.
Alex, can I ask a question here? Were there signs prior to going to university? Because I don't imagine this was a first time.
There were lots of signs, but it was 2014. People really weren't talking about video gaming addiction. So I knew it wasn't drugs. I knew it wasn't alcohol. I couldn't put a finger on what it was. But yeah, he'd come home the summer between first and second year, and he was gaming all the time. He just had a part-time job, but he justified in it that I'm going to be in co-op after this, so it's my last free summer. Just give me my last free summer. When I saw him losing weight and I saw him not grooming the first few weeks into school, he always justified everything with, the program's harder in second year. I'm up late. I'm doing assignments. I'm not getting as much sleep. I just knew in my gut, though, something was wrong. So yeah, there definitely were signs. And in the end of high school, his grades started to slip. So this problem was already in existence in high school as well.
Thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah. Dr. Bean, can you discuss some of the psychological impacts that, can be happening with either gaming addiction or gaming and esports with students, and how we as educators or how parents can support mental health and wellness through esports?
Yeah, so Elaine actually hit on quite a few of the things that we generally talk about when we work with parents and other clients and this stuff. Is there was an avoidance of daily activities, of grooming behavior, of lying, and of lying into the space of not being true, not just to the people around us, but to ourselves, and
Mm.
kind of having that type of thing. When gamers kind of get involved in that type of that deep space, we'll call it, what happens is that they tend to lose sight of what's actually happening all around them. And when they lose sight of what's happening around them, they can't actually take everything in. They're only focused on like kind of like a bubble of kind of what happens. It's very similar to like how social media works. Is when we work with kids with social media difficulties, and like they're always on their phones, TikTok, things like that. We're always making sure that they're aware that um, social media is a bubble. Think of it as kind of like a hollow egg. It's very fragile. You can see anything on the outside. You can observe it from 360 degrees. But on the inside, there's nothing else. You're only seeing a shell of the person. You're only seeing a very small part. Um, when we work with gamers in that aspect, that's what tends to happen with them. They're only seeing a very small part of what's actually happening to them when they go down into this very heavy journey into video games and unhealthy gaming behavior. And it takes a village, it takes a family to really pull them on out. The biggest thing is to make sure that families are one aware of what the signs are. Elaine, you picked up quick on those ones, which is great. I can tell you the parents down here are it's usually like 2 to 3 years that are just they're already too late in some of that stuff, and so we have to do so much pullback on so many other things, put much more rules and boundaries and other things in place in order to really pull the student, the child, the adolescent, the adult in some cases out of that as well. And so it's really about being aware of when gaming takes over the life. When you think of yourself as kind of like a pie chart, right? You have time for work, you have time for school, you have time for sleep, you have time for all these other areas. When video gaming starts to open up in that pie chart and take up a majority of your time, that's the first sign to be like something's going on. Let's go into this. We have to make an intervention on that one going forward. That's kind of where that comes into play. So when we have to do those educations, when supporting those educators, parents, and other clinicians and different ideas within that, we really have to focus in on what's the games being played, how are they working on their ADLs, what's happening in their life, and is there something else that we can do to kind of help support them in that moment?
Absolutely.
Can I ask a little bit of a follow-up question at the beginning when you were talking about, that the they almost lose themselves in the game, right? Well, especially with many games being these fantasy role-playing games anyway, is it almost like the game sucks them in, or
Uh, so
what
so
typically happens there?
Well, it's funny because during our kind of like um pre-talk here before we started this, we were actually talking about like you guys decided to do non-consciously decided to do this on election day here in the United States, and everyone's anxiety is like super high right now here in the US for various reasons. And one of the things that helps calm us in a lot of ways is when we play games in different helpful ways. It actually can utilize it for mindfulness activities. You can use it for self-esteem. You can use it for a lot of different areas. And so when we say kind of like the words getting sucked in, it's more like fantasy world's a lot more exciting than the real world. And sometimes the real world is really crappy. And it's really hard for us to kind of engage in that when there's something that's inside of a fantasy world that feels a lot more engaging, a lot more present, a lot more fun.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I can see that draw because, some of the games I play, chopping wood for 4 hours is a wonderful escape to do things to do things on some of the games I play. But not everybody plays Lumberjack Simulator. So, talking about this will go right in. This is going to go a really good segue here. Talking about the mental aspect, but also we have this connection to physiology with our gaming, right? And with esports needing the physical, right? So Riley, how does exercise physiology intersect with esports? and what practical steps can we take to promote physical health?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a really huge role, first and foremost, in education for what physical activity and exercise can offer people who, whether they're gaming recreationally, casually, or whether they do have more of that competitive goal, competitive pathway, or, you know, if they're lucky, turning it into a competitive professional career. Gone are the days where, you know, we accept that grind culture is the best thing, I think, for performance in esports. It's a very early stage still when it comes to health and physiology research in esports, but we are starting to see that, you know, if you are sitting in front of a game for 10 hours, that's probably actually not going to be the best thing for your performance at all. And if we can break that up, if we can give you mental breaks, so that we're trying to limit that sort of a cumulative effect of mental fatigue and cognitive fatigue over time, particularly if we can put some of the really lovely things that we get out of exercise into that, especially for the brain, and things like blood flow, neurochemistry changes. That's actually, like, we're really trying to help people move in that direction where all of this stuff that you're doing for your health is only going to continue to support your performance moving forward. So education, I think, plays a huge role in that, starting nice and early in schools and at grassroots levels, now that we're starting to see a lot more structure and structuring our programs pop up around that. If we can help normalize that, you know, health and gaming can actually live parallel and can really positively affect one another moving forward, that's something that is really important. If we're getting down to the actual physiology of what's happening, one of my favorite pieces of research in exercise and esports to have come out to talk about is things like the effect of, you know, you can do a pretty intense cycling session about 30 minutes before you want to jump on, and I don't know, maybe you're getting into ranked games for League of Legends or Valorant or something along those lines. And we know that if you push yourself for even 15 or 20 minutes on a bike, you give yourself a bit of a break and then you jump into your game, you're going to have improved blood flow, you're going to have improved connections in your brain, the neurochemistry is going to be really getting you ready to be reacting quicker, being a bit more accurate with your shots. So we can use that education as almost like this really positive performance enhancing vehicle. And then the trade-off for that is that we've got people engaging in these activities that is also enhancing their broader health overall. So it's very early days with what we know, how those intersections can be occurring and what we can actually get out of it. But I think, yeah, the important thing is that we're really consistent with that messaging that, you know, it does not have to, you know, the typification of a gamer does not have to look like, you know, someone who is unhealthy. It's actually something that I think we can move forward really positively with.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that, you know, with the incorporation of various new types of augmented or virtual reality systems, I think physicality within a game can only increase. You know, when you're running or you're jumping or you're crouching within a game, I think you're just going to see that increase.
If you don't mind me saying, what are the things that we actually do down here? Well, what I do with my clients is that if they are not active and they're not doing stuff, in order for them to, say, play a video game, watch anime, do something along those lines, they have to be moving during it. So whether it's a recumbent bike, whether it's a treadmill as they're playing, it's something like that, at least getting them moving. And we've seen a switch with that is when they start doing that, they start doing it outside of the video game space as well. So I think Riley's onto something with that, because that's kind of one of our interventions that we focus on here.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, to add on to that as well, Dr. Bean, there's an insurmountable amount of evidence at the moment in support of the use of exercise as treatment for a variety of mental health concerns and conditions as well. So, you know, for some people, exercise alone can be really effective in and of itself. For other people, they need that additional support, whether it be through psychological intervention, additional medical intervention, and those things running parallel. But 100%, it's yeah, if we step outside of esports and gaming and we start pulling what we know from other fields, there are so many different applications, which I think lends really well to just the field of esports in general. Like, we're such a multidisciplinary kind of space. There's so much crossover from so many different areas and fields.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and you're talking about you know, crossover between different fields, and you know, there's a lot of new data. Elaine, you know, you said that this all started in 2014 with you and your story. so you've obviously done 10 years now of research and study and speaking. What common misconceptions are you seeing or have you seen about gaming addiction, and how have they changed over that 10 years?
Oh, have they changed? Probably not. Um, I mean, we're getting a little bit more on board with it being an issue to begin with. I mean, originally it was, how can this be an addiction? It's not drugs, it's not alcohol. How can it show similar kinds of symptoms? That's a big misconception. It is a behavioral addiction, not a substance addiction, but it does create many of the same symptoms. For Jake, the withdrawal was horrific. He grieved his online friends. He felt agitated. He said he felt like his brain was constantly vibrating. It was uncomfortable. He was irritable, much like you'd see someone withdrawing from a drug. Maybe not to the same severity. But I think the big misconceptions is I can stop. It's not addiction. I can stop.
Yeah.
I can manage this. I get often parents who have had kids that have dropped out of their first year of university calling for coaching. And then we're trying to establish healthy activities and routines before they go back to university, and they don't see the value in that. No. When I get back to university, I'll stop then. They don't realize that it's going to be more difficult to wait and to stop then than it is to start some routines now.
Yeah, and I see some of those even in, and I'm not trying to make light of the situation that you were in, but some of these things where you see children throwing temper tantrums about having an iPad taken away, or some of these online, not online, but these iPad games, or being exposed to these things at an early age. I'm guilty of it myself. My 5-year-old, he will throw the biggest temper tantrum when time's up for iPad time. And I can see that as he is addicted is the wrong word at this age and at this point. But that thing of I give him the warnings to stop. He says, okay, I will stop. Okay, I will stop. But then time comes and he cannot stop, and he just cannot pull himself away from that. So yeah. So I mean, yeah, incredible.
Well, and isn't that the design? I mean, isn't
Exactly.
that's part of the developers? That's designed that way. And I think that's what a lot of parents, and I know I didn't understand that until I, probably got into this job, how these games and not even just games, Facebook, most electronic, it's designed for you to come back over and over and over again and get that, what is it, shot of dopamine or whatever it is.
You got to get that fix.
It's the fix. And so I think that a lot of people don't understand that we are being manipulated, and we need to teach this, that this is a marketing scheme. This is a marketing ploy, or this is marketing, even if you don't add the whatever descriptor behind it. I don't know if all parents or students or know that that is built in, that you're supposed to go back. That's why notifications are on your phone. That's why, the thumbs up and thumbs down. We are programmed to interact with these, and that's the difference between. I've had conversations with parents that say, well, we've had television for years and we were afraid that they'd get addicted to television. But I said, but you're not interacting with television like we are interacting now. Can one of you speak on that a little bit, or a couple of you speak on that?
I would like to say something about that, because Jake and I, which is my son's name, were having a conversation about this because I was doing an interview with a magazine about, are the games addictive, and are they made to be addictive? And although they're made to bring you back and continue to engage you, Jake made this really interesting statement to me, and I'll read it to you. So I wrote it down ahead so I get it right. I was addicted to games not because they were overly addictive, but because I was overly in need of addiction and lacked the self-regulation to prevent it.
Wow.
That actually it kind of speaks to one of the things. So like I wrote a parenting book on this because my kid learned to read off of Pokemon. But one of the things that we did, so I'm a psychologist, my wife's a psychologist as well, and one of the things that obviously I'm very well versed in video games, technology, and everything else along those lines. My parents didn't have that. I want to be very clear. Like my parents saw TV, electronics, everything like that as just like the worst thing you could do to anyone. I see the points that they were trying to make. I don't agree with how they implemented it. And so what we've done and what we always try to talk about with parents is it's a lot easier to get ahead of this now when they're younger than it is when they're teenagers because you've already had all these years built in where there hasn't been rules, regulations, other types of things that are there to kind of teach healthy habits in this type of world. So even with my son and everything along those lines, we see usually, so it's really fascinating. My daughter's 5, my son's 8. My son can play for about 45, 50 minutes, and that's like his max until he gets something what we call kind of like a video game hangover, where irritability, mood changes, things like that. My daughter can go for about an hour and a half before that happens. And there's just different brain chemistry that's kind of happening there, different gender, different everything. But one of the things that we always have to teach parents is like the prefrontal cortex on kids is not fully developed until they're in college. Like they are 25, 28. That's when our prefrontal cortex, the whole thing that does impulsivity, being able to help regulate our own emotions, if it is continuously being bombarded by everything left to right, there's not a time for it to rest, for it to understand, for it to rules, regulations, for everything that kind of come into play in us for us to as parents to kind of help teach those things. We're in a sense also setting our kids up for failure unwittingly. And so it's in my opinion of everything what we do and when we work with parents is you have to set in your own online mental health some sort of rules and regulations for your house. Ours is 45 minutes to an hour. They don't watch TV or really do any sort of interactions with any sort of games, television, or anything like that until the weekend. And that's because during the school week, their stuff is set up to do for what they have to do in the real world: education, sports, other types of activities, friendships, things like that. And then on the weekend, they get some time. And we've really built that into a really good routine for them. And we've seen really good progress, not just for our kids, but when we work with other families in other areas too.
Elaine, I'd like to jump back, and I'm alluding to a couple of questions that are popping up in the chat also. And so these are really a couple of different questions. You had mentioned that he didn't have the skills, the self-regulation. Was this, so do you think he was more predispositioned to become addicted and this just happened to be the drug of choice? Does that make sense? And what are your thoughts there? So
Yeah.
I guess as parents, when parents watch this, they're going to be looking, is my kid going, that's what we do as parents, is he's playing too many video games, is this his thing? I mean, was your son going to become addicted to some, he said this, I was looking for an addiction. He was looking for.
Yeah, he was looking for a coping mechanism. He didn't
Yes.
have a healthy coping mechanism to deal with the stress. He was looking for an avoidance tool. That
Yeah.
was the avoidance tool.
Okay.
Could I say he was predisposed to be addicted? I don't know that for a fact. He did get a late diagnosis at age 19 of ADHD. So he had low dopamine, low impulsivity control. And we're finding in coaching that a number of our gaming addicted kids also have ADHD. It's a perfect storm for them. It allows the brain to operate at 110% where they're happy. It gives them a hit of dopamine. It's a structure. It's instant reward. It's not great. So maybe the ADHD played a part in that because he wasn't diagnosed and it wasn't being managed. But I think for him, mostly it was, I need something to help me hide. So because I don't know what to do with this. And so this is just giving me the opportunity to escape and not have to deal with it and cope with it. And that became the addiction.
So
And Dr. Bean,
Yeah, I can help with this one as well.
Yeah.
Well, in our research in all of the psych testing, so the things that I do down here, I'm an executive director of the Telos Project, a 501c3 nonprofit. I'm the CEO of Geek Therapeutics, where we do education and everything like that. One of the biggest things that we're seeing through the research, client interactions, and psychological assessment. Those are the three things I'm going to talk about real quick. We're seeing the comorbidity of ADHD, autism, depression, and anxiety. Those are the big four that we're seeing that are hugely comorbid with video gaming problems. And it is, speaking from a neurological standpoint, it almost like seems to have it be a perfect storm, as Elaine kind of did it, is like those diagnoses, those neuroatypicalities are kind of what helps bring this into focus a little bit more. It creates the problems, or we have to create those coping skills and those structures outside of it.
And along those same lines, as I'm thinking as a mother, now I'm thinking as a mother, I have a 20-year-old,
Oh, she's gone
18-year-old,
off
and an
script now.
11-year-old.
Oh, totally off bounds here.
Yeah. What is the difference? And this is a question in the chat. What's the difference between a kid who wants to play video games all the time versus one that wants to draw or play basketball all the time? And how do those compare? Positively, negatively, the same?
So this is an interesting one, and I'd want to hear Elaine's as well on this one. Is that Elaine mentioned something called a behavioral addiction, and I have seen that more, and I'm one of the ones that I think that's more in supportive of this type of terminology. Um, our DSM, our research teams, and there's a huge discrepancy between research and practitioners. That's one of the biggest things. Research people think they're like, oh, we found the solution, and over here as therapists, we're like, that's not possible. Like you can't implement that very easily. It doesn't coincide very well. So one of the things that we're kind of seeing a little bit more of within the research is a push for that behavioral regulation, a behavioral diagnosis. That's kind of more of a catch-all rather than us kind of creating different types of addictions. Oh, video game addiction, heroin addiction. Here's this running addiction that's starting to come into things. We've had some of the writers of that do research basically be like, I have a writing addiction in this other stuff. I have a reading addiction. These are all things that if you look at people that are having some difficulties with this, there's a comorbidity of another diagnosis, one with it. And then two, there's also a lot of evidence for us to be looking at this from a holistic standpoint, a more of a behavioral standpoint, rather than just an individual one. I think what our research tends to get lost into is we start off with internet gaming disorder. Now we're in gaming addiction. Now we're on gaming disorder. And even to this point, all the research that we've seen in this area, the IGD, SF9, all these things, people just keep on pushing them well, but the foundation of how they've been created is not really solid. And that's a big problem. And that's one of the reasons why, in my opinion, we're not really talking about this in a lot of ways, because we're still treating it as an addiction for like a substance abuse. I think that we need to be looking at it from more of a behavioral standpoint, and having that work in those areas can be, in my opinion, much more beneficial for us to find solutions rather than treat it as a problem from an external source.
Yeah, and in terms of if you're looking at someone that wants to draw all the time versus wants to play video games, is it problematic? I mean, you can draw, but are you also playing other games? Are you spending time with your family? Are you looking after yourself? Are you looking after your grooming? I mean, you can be excited about reading all the time as well, but if it leads into the problematic state where you're giving up everything else for your life just to do that, then there's really no difference between playing video games all the time versus just drawing all the time and not engaging in life.
But I guess when you said that, I thought to myself, or if you're cutting your ear off, or you're, that I know I'm kind of saying that in jest, but there are examples, and you're exactly right. Most things done in excess are not healthy and beneficial for you. Riley, we'd like to bring you in again about your research is fascinating, and let's bring the physicality into this discussion now that I've brought up cutting your ear off.
Oh, good segue.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
We're just pulling Van Gogh here. It's fine, guys. It's fine.
Very nice transition. You're welcome.
That's it. I actually I think it's a really interesting, and I'm full disclosure, like the addiction side, the problematic gaming side is very much outside of my my professional expertise, but certainly been doing some interesting readings on the topic. I think it's a really interesting feed into like when we compare what I guess a professional esports player is doing compared to someone who is considered a problematic gamer. Like, we've potentially got similar hours attributed towards it in a day. We've got similar, maybe I wouldn't say similar impact to ADLs though. And I think I've read 1 or 2 papers that have even compared things like motivations to be engaged in gaming and like ongoing that's it. It was motivations and personality traits associated with a group of people who are considered professional esports players. They've got a contract, they're being paid to do this as a full-time job, versus people who I think it was people who met criteria back when it was IGD being the main sort of focus. And like, I 100% agree with the behavioral thing. Like, we see it in sports as well. We see people who are incredible sports athletes who, you know, albeit being a sports athlete is also not the healthiest thing in the world. They've got a huge rate of injury risk. There's a lot of sports that are associated with very poor health changes later on in their lifetime. But there isn't that perception that, oh, this is a bad thing for this person. Whereas we can have people with addictions to, I think the running was a really, really good example. And a lot of the motivations behind that could be, you know, maybe they've got a very perfectionist type A style personality, and they've decided this is my thing that I'm going to perfect, or it's potentially someone who has issues with an eating disorder, and then it's that compulsive engagement. So I think that the behavioral approaches are a really interesting area, and I'm certainly really keen to hear about like what sort of comes out of it if the research is heading in that direction. From the physicality side of things, like any lifestyle that is associated with a huge chunk of sitting time in your day-to-day life, we've got a plethora of things that we need to be concerned about. It's gaming, it's esports, it's office workers, it's researchers, like, you know, anyone who spends a huge amount of their time sitting down on a day-to-day basis, we need to be concerned about. There's been some extremely early research as well for like comparison of things like, if we look at a bunch of esports players I think this one was at a college level, versus let's match their age, they're still in college, people doing really similar stuff in the day-to-day, but they don't play games at all. Even things like body composition, like we're seeing lower rates of or a lower percentage of lean mass. So lean mass being things like muscle tissue in their body. We're actually seeing a smaller we're seeing a lower bone mineral density. So we're not seeing them accruing as much strength in their bones as they should be at that point in time in their life. So there are quite a few, I guess, flow-on effects that we need to be really considerate about for, again, even the people who are making this their careers, even the people who are engaging in programs where they're getting a lot of really you know, transferable like career skills out of it, like communication, event production, leadership, some of the more like positive social connections that can still be made in a gaming space outside of the problematic realm. We've still got, okay, if you're doing this for a huge chunk of time in your teens and 20s and 30s, what does it look like in your 40s, 50s, and 60s? You know, how can we try and help set up and embed these healthy behaviors at this early age to make sure that you can keep doing this for as long as you want, but that you're not setting yourself up for a plethora of health risks down the line. So that's, again, with my background being in exercise physiology, that's our whole job. We're really, like, our whole job is helping people be more active and having some really specific exercise programs to help with really specific health concerns and conditions. And it's just applying that to this esports field, and like, how can we get them moving? How can we get them doing some strength work so that they're not becoming frail earlier than they should do, or, you know, having a fall and breaking their bone at 60 because they're a gamer. So, yeah.
Well, and while we're on the topic, your research focuses on the menstrual cycle impact on female esports athletes. Like, what are you finding? I know you're not completely finished with it, but what are you finding? What is this telling us?
Yeah, we're still pretty super early with that. I'm only about 1.5 years in, so we're getting started with data collection at the moment, which is really exciting. I think that, I mean, there's a Generation Esports had a brilliant webinar on it only a couple of weeks ago, talking about girls in gaming and the importance of it. You know, we're seeing women, and we're seeing, I guess, marginalized genders in general starting to become a lot more appreciated is probably not the right word, but acknowledged in the pro space in esports. We're seeing some really brilliant programs popping up. I think Valorant has really been trailblazers with their game changes, and I really, really hope to see Riot pick up something on the League of Legends side as well. We'll see. They've already announced what the new League of Legends championship tournament is going to be next year, and I haven't seen anything in regards to a marginalized gender tournament, which was a bit disappointing, but anyway, I digress. With the menstrual cycle stuff. So at the moment, again, I mentioned esports health and physiology research very much in its infancy. We've got about 5 years of research that sort of started the ball rolling. Unsurprisingly, huge majority of people involved in those studies all male, and that's mainly been as a function of who has been involved in the competitive scene at this point in time. And so what that means is that, yeah, we're missing out on a really huge chunk of what is highly, highly relevant to females in a performance space, i.e. being their menstrual cycle. So what we're really interested in looking at is things like cyclic symptoms and health changes associated with the cycle, particularly when people are going through their menstrual phase, when they're having their period. You know, we see changes that are really quite profound in the brain. It goes for the structure of the brain, the way that blood flows through the brain, the way that different areas of the brain talk to each other, associated with different phases of the menstrual cycle, and a lot of that is really mediated by estrogen and progesterone. So if we've got people who are trying to compete at the top level in a highly, highly cognitively demanding field, i.e. esports, and we know that their brain is changing just as a function of their normal hormones, that I think that's worth looking into.
Yeah.
You know, that could be different strategies potentially for how you prepare for a competition. It could be the way that, you know, there are potentially, you know, half of the month we can push someone a little bit more in training, the other half of the month, hey, we actually need to change the approach. So there are a lot of areas. It's sort of, the more I've read into it, the more it's sort of just opened up with, oh, we could look here, we could look here, we could look here. But the most important motivation is I really wanted to kickstart health performance guidelines that encompass all players of esports, not just people who have been the predominant group so far. So it's very much a watch this space at this point in time, but yeah, very, very excited to see what we find from that.
Yeah, fascinating. Like the amount of technical and medical stuff. I don't have good enough words for it, but the brain chemistry and blood flow and all, it's amazing to me. It's so interesting.
Well, and I feel like you're gonna see applications beyond gaming. You know, we always talk about jobs that we don't even know. You know, are these applications to, you know, as the military becomes more digitalized, as jobs in general become more digitalized, and the stress that's involved in that, and you don't have the physicality of the day to day, and you're sitting, many of us are sitting so much. I just think that because it's such a common theme, video game play, and it spans beyond socioeconomic, you know, 97% of kids play video games, and they'll probably translate somewhat into adults who play some type of video game. I'm really excited to see how research in these areas, you know, cross over into other jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I want to talk about, you know, we've talked a lot about what's happened, and I want to talk about how we can prevent, how we can take steps to alleviate, you know, gaming causing a problem. anywhere in people's lives. So this will be a three-part question. So each of you will take take your expertise in each part of this one. So, how can we effectively integrate insights from psychology, physical health, and addiction awareness to develop support systems for students that are participating in gaming or esports? So we'll start with psychology. We'll talk with you with Dr. Bean.
Of course, the fun one, right? The one
Yeah.
that's always like pushed under the rug everywhere. On everything. The largest thing that when we talk to teachers, school psychologists and everything down here and across the United States, our biggest thing is when you start seeing disappointment come in, when you start seeing mood changes, when you start seeing things start to negatively affect them, whether it's mood, whether it's grade dropping, that's your intervention. That is your light bulb. That is your time to get there, because that is the beginning. And it's kind of like one of the things, if you don't see it, it doesn't exist. And so it's about paying attention to some of the precursors to having that. With younger kids, it's about the shutting down. When they don't want to express themselves, when they don't want to talk to you about something, when they put their arms like this and they just want to look down and stuff. Those are all the signs when you're looking at working with younger kids that are like, something's going on. We need to get involved in here. There needs to be an intervention. So it's one of the reasons why we have school counselors. But school counselors are overwhelmed. I mean, my son's school, it's grade K through 5. They have one school counselor. They have one school counselor for literally 1,500 students. I mean, I'm a psychologist. I see between intakes and clients a week, somewhere around 30 to 35. How is one school counselor supposed to honestly see 1,500 kids in a week? I mean, that just boggles my mind in ways. But there's a lot of things I think that having the supports within an educational system is really, really effective when you have those supports. And I see, from what I've seen, a trend over the last couple of 5 to 10 years, it has been that there's a lack of supports and people are taking them away. Texas is not great for this, so don't follow this. I come from Massachusetts, the land of like, let's give out all the supports we possibly can, coming down to here where they're like, let's take them all away and everything. And it's really quite a lot of heart, and that's when we got the PTA involved. We've gotten a lot of parental individuals involved. I started showing up after school and coaching some soccer teams and some other stuff. It's about engagement, and it's not just the students, the teachers, things. It's parental engagement, and I think that's really what we are having some difficulties within this space, is that parents don't know how to engage this type of behavior, this newfound technology, and it's only going to get more and more with VR coming into things. I'm sure in 5 years, if not less, we're going to see a massive increase in problems, difficulties, but also benefits that VR is going to be able to do. And it's about, you got to take the good with the bad. You got to be able to know what's happening, and you have to educate yourself. And it's about the engagement. And I think that's one of the things that we strive to do, is how can we engage the community? How can we engage the school? How can we engage the students? To me, it's all about that community. The stronger the community is, the more likely it is to succeed.
Yeah.
Maybe engagement and education.
Maybe
Parents don't know.
putting more money into education rather than taking it out every year.
Yeah. Yeah. And Elaine, your thoughts right on the end there, with what Dr. Bean had said about, having that support, and, what can we do to integrate what you've learned at an earlier age to avoid what Jake dealt with?
At an earlier age, I mean, Dr. Bean has really covered a lot of that. What I can speak about is the older end, because a lot of
please.
the average age of a gaming addict is a male between 18 and 25. Jake and I got involved with a professor and created a module that's available to universities across Canada, because the thing that upset me the most about Jake's situation is that he was in a campus townhouse with 2 other young males for 2 months. And at no point, excuse me, did either of those 2 males say, hey man, you okay? Haven't
Mhm.
seen a lot of you. Doesn't look like you're going to class. Are you eating?
Yeah.
You okay? No one said a word. You could have died in that room. No one would have said a word. And so
Mhm.
that upset me the most. And we as parents of adults, we let them go off to school with freedom because we want them to have the agency to prove that they can do this on their own. And they want to have the agency. So they're not checking in with parents as much. And university professors have, 1,500 students in their class, so they're not seeing everything. But students see students. And so what we set out to do in the module is to teach students how they can check in with each other. And if you're not comfortable approaching another student to say, I think there's a problem, then you can at least go to student services and say, hey, we're worried about this student. And maybe student services can then pay a check-in with a residence and get the student to help that they need. Because we need to be doing more at that end because the services are there. Universities, when I took Jake to student services to say, I need help, there was all kinds of services available. Getting Jake to recognize he needed the services was the problem. There's a big gap between having the services and getting the students to use them.
And like you said, especially adult children and newly adult children.
Yeah.
The adult
Yeah.
children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and
So
you
we,
don't, I think also, and remember 18, 20-year-old, you don't want, there's a stigma attached to the helicopter parent and the lawnmower parent and,
Snowplow. Don't forget the snowplow.
the
snowplow parent. I haven't heard
and
that
those
one yet.
are negative. I mean, there's that extreme, but parent as our adult children are navigating this for the first time, the parents of adult children are navigating this for the first time. And there's no rule book here either, where when do you step in? And then there's privacy laws, there's that privacy. You can't call up and check, and nor should you probably call up and check on. But you get in a situation like you were in, Elaine, and your hands are tied if that adult child decides, I'm not doing this.
Right.
Yeah. Elaine, what would you say if we could go back to that last year of high school where you said that there was a little bit of concern still in that last, senior year, summer, possibly even during the school year a little bit. What steps would you have liked to seen in the school taken to address issues that could have been there, but even faintly there?
The problem with Jake was he's so smart. He was still
Mhm.
pulling off decent grades. He still got the
Okay.
grade enough to get into university. And that's a lot of my students that young people I work with is they're these really intelligent kids that are, they're sliding under the radar. He was falling asleep in class. I wasn't aware of that. I would have liked teachers to have been able to reach out to me at the high school level to say, hey, we're wondering if there's a problem because Jake's falling asleep in classes. And the grades were slipping somewhat. University first year, he actually failed 3 courses and didn't tell us. He came home at the end of that year and said it was fabulous. Took us out for a celebratory dinner and paid for it. And we bought it hook, line, and sinker. We had no idea. It wasn't until he went back in second year and then we discovered, the addiction that over the time he was home, it was full disclosure. If you want help with this, you're going to have to be honest. And that's when we learned that the first year wasn't a success. And there was no way that the school could have told us that he hadn't been put on academic probation yet. We would have been told at that point, but I don't know, there's a fine line between, as you say, they're 18 years old and you don't want to step over the line of the privacy that they're entitled to, but then also these are children's lives at stake and their mental health at stake. And so I would have appreciated, calls from either the high school or the university or both.
Absolutely. And I think that, even if we were getting calls, and I can say this about, people that we work with through the high schools that Christy and I work with, the teachers and the educators knowing what to do is usually not there, right? It's just the amount of education for the educators in dealing with mental health aspects or understanding mental health components or signs or symptoms. It just isn't there. And they have enough, as Christy and I are both former teachers, there's already a lot of stuff that we have to do on our plates And mental health in the last 10 years or so has been added to that in something else that teachers are now becoming responsible for. As I would going to connect it to Dr. Bean's complaint about having only one counselor. Well, why have more than one when you have 30 others in the building, right? That are there to help kids, right? So
that's like putting sorry for interrupting. That's like putting on. So I work with a lot of officers and PDs down here that their number one complaint is like, I'm not mental health. I can deal with some crises and it's like there's too much put upon one plate, and then they get rid of all these other things, and you're just like, guys, there's a reason our jobs exist. If you just disseminate appropriately, these things wouldn't be as much of a problem.
Yeah,
well, I
absolutely.
feel like some of the problem too is in Jake's case, and I see this a lot, these are good kids. If these were kids who weren't showing up to school, who were failing classes, who were causing, it's those good kids that fly under the radar that, you might, but I've got all these issues over here that are serious issues that I need to deal with as an educator. And so it snowballs over here a lot of times because they're good kids. And they are good kids. They absolutely are good kids, but good kids can have trying and troubling times.
Absolutely. Well, I hate to cut us off because I mean we didn't even get close to the amount of questions in that I wanted to. But what I do want to do is I want to open this up at the end here. Where can we find information that you provide, right? Do you have any resources that you'd like to share, things that you go to, things that have helped you? We'll just kind of go around Robin here on those resources. And then, one, final thought for esports and gaming according to your expertise. We'll start with Riley.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that honestly, where I've learned so much has just been trying to be engaged in community. So reaching out to see, do you have any local events in the area? Reaching out to see if you have any professionals in the area, even if it's a little bit further than that. Like for me, Australia is a pretty small esports bubble still at the moment. So I've actually come across a lot of really helpful resources just as a fact of reaching out to people. And I think in esports, I've never been turned away either. I think everyone's so open and so happy to be able to share that and to help grow. So that would actually be my biggest recommendation is just reach out. For physical health stuff, I've got a website where we're starting to put up a lot of free resources and blogs for simple stuff like here's some wrist exercises that you can do to help out if you're starting to get wrist pain with gaming. Here's how to take an active gaming break. Here's how to help rest your eyes across a gaming session. So be really happy to share my site for that as well if anyone's interested in some of those actionable exercise resources where you can get started with people straight away. But otherwise, reach out, get engaged, talk to people, learn about what's out there. I think that's really the most important thing that we can do to increase communication across those networks.
Riley, and I can either type it in the chat or if you'd put it in the chat because we'd like to we post this, we'll put the resources below.
Beautiful. Yep, I'll do that now. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, thank you.
Elaine.
You can find me on ElaineUskoski.com. And my first book is Seeing Through the Cracks, which was not supposed to be the video gaming addiction book, but became the first one because no one else was talking about it then. It actually, back to what you were saying earlier, Christy, is a book on the transition between parenting your child and parenting your adult child.
Is that Seeing Through the Cracks? Did I get that right?
That was a hard transition.
Oh, you got it right there.
Oh, look at that.
I was gonna link the Amazon link.
Yeah.
And the second book is Cyber Sober, A Caregiver's Guide to Video Gaming Addiction, which parents and caregivers of those in trouble can look for to learn about gaming addiction. Also, I love the esports group. By the way, I'm not anti-gaming or anti-esports. I spoke at the summit in South Korea last November.
Oh, really?
And I think what came out of that the most was we don't really have from the ground up how to help our kids become professional esports. We have that for sports, dance, and we don't have that in place. And what I find is with my clients that these kids and parents think you just have to play a lot. And as Riley said earlier, that's not actually effective to just be playing for hours and hours and hours.
That's what I was thinking while we were doing this, because we are Generation Esports, and I don't want our viewers to think that we're bashing on. This is just
No.
sometimes we need to have difficult conversations and talk about
absolutely.
it seriously. And we could also have a whole nother hour on the positives about esports. We didn't want to leave this on a negative note.
That's right.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Bean, what do you have for us?
Oh boy. I do too much. I've been told I do too much. It sounds like Elaine and I are very similar in that one, which is half the fun of being on the forefront of all this. So the easiest way to find me is to just Google my name. But I also, like I said, I'm the CEO of Geek Therapeutics. We provide therapy assessment and other things across the United States. We're educational platform as well, nationally accredited through a lot of the United States National Accreditation Board for APA, NVCC, ASWB, and a couple other areas as well. I'm going to link a couple things there for you so you guys can have that. Easiest way to get a hold of us is to go to those websites, send an email. I read all emails, even though I have people managing all that stuff. I just pick the ones that are more geared towards me on that stuff. And that is the book that I wrote on how do we work with our kids in this nerd culture that just had this massive resurgence over this last 5 years or so. And I 100% agree is we don't have anything for the kids that want to be esports players, and it did start off that way. Like you got to do 10 to 12 hours of gaming a day, and it's like, no, you don't. That's not how that works. You can do it in moderation and still be really, really solid in a lot of ways.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I mean, I can't thank you guys enough, all of you, for being on here, your various time zones and your various commitments for stopping all of that to talk health and wellness and esports. I know that our viewership is going to really appreciate this. And so those of you that are watching, those of you that will be watching, thank you for watching this, and take this to who you need to take it to show that there is some positive lights and that there are a lot of benefits that esports can provide you and your school and your students. And that there are mechanisms and structures in place to benefit you mentally, physically, emotionally, behaviorally through esports and through education, and to provide those for your students and for yourself maybe. So again, thank you to the panelists. I just want to appreciate you guys so much. And if you're liking this, if you want to see more of these, obviously like and subscribe to our channel. And we will be putting connections for this video in the description for Elaine, Riley, Dr. Bean. All of those will be in the description, as well as all the resources that they have provided to us. So again, thanks everybody for being here. And I just want to say have a great evening, and we will see you next time.